Hello, everyone. I hope you're warm wherever you are. I live in Colorado and it's been below zero the last few days, so I have a space heater right next to me if you can hear some ambient noise. So that's what that is. Okay, so my name is Kira. I am a coach for teens and parents, and I created this group to offer you insight and inspiration and guidance. Hi, Emily. It's so nice to see you. And tools from someone who was in your child's shoes and is now in a radically different place. That someone is me. I was a very, very insecure, depressed, hopeless, anxious, sensitive teenager. And this video is answering a question from a parent asked from my last video. And that is, what do you do if your child has been given the resources and the tools and the skills and the support to make different choices in regards to their mental health? Because for so many families in this group and families that are not yet in this group, that is their story, and that has been their experience and trajectory with their child's mental health journey. They will tell me, I've been to this therapist and we've done that program and we've tried no consequences and we've tried consistent consequences, and it doesn't seem like anything is working. And so they're realizing that what's missing is not just the practical knowledge for their children of like, what are the coping skills that my child needs to use? Like, there's something else that's going on if your child has been given the tools and resources and are still really struggling and still making self-destructive choices. So let's get into it. So yeah, when I was a teenager, there was no lack of resources in terms of what can I do if I'm having a tough time. I knew the coping skills from DBT. I knew how to work with a thought from CBT. I knew mindfulness from ACT. Those are all different types of therapy. But when I was in a tough moment, I would still cut myself. I would still argue with my parents. I would still do really dangerous things. I would avoid school. Like, you name it, I would do that. And I had been shown other ways. Like, there was a plethora of practical tools at my disposal, but I did not reach for them. And this is really what was missing, was that I didn't understand the parts of me that were self-destructive. I didn't understand their motivation and their strategy. So I'm going to zoom out to explain this a little bit. We all have different parts to us. We have parts that are more social or more shy, parts that are more clear, parts that are more scattered. And we can want something through one of these parts, but have other parts that are afraid of that change happening. And the truth is as well, is that a lot of these parts are focused on protecting us. And the parts that are focused on protecting us are not able to see outside the moment that we're in. So when a teenager does something, like let's say your teenager is at a party and they have been trying not to drink, but they're at a party and someone offers them a beer and they say yes. What's going on is that they're so focused on that moment and whatever needs to happen in that moment. They're not thinking 10 steps ahead to be like, is this safe? Is this actually in alignment with what I want to do? Is this going to put me in a better position tomorrow? They're just in that moment. They're only thinking of that moment. And that's true for parts. Like when you're in the scattered part, it can be really, really hard to access or remember that there are other parts of you that are clear. And with teenagers, like when they're in a part, it's focused on the here and now and what it wants in that moment. And in the example that I gave with drinking at a party, it wants to fit in and it wants to connect with peers, so it does that. It's not thinking about this whole system of parts and the bigger picture of their life and like, okay, maybe I want to do this in this moment, but what is the rest of my like higher awareness think of this? They just act and do what they're doing in the moment. And The parts of us that are trying to protect us are similarly just focused on protecting us. I'm feeling bad. I don't want to feel bad. I'm feeling scared. I don't want to feel scared. I'm feeling shame. I don't want to feel shame. So I'm going to do whatever I can to just get out of that uncomfortable feeling as a form of self-protection. Like, that's what the part is thinking. It's not thinking like, oh, I'm going to smoke weed because I'm trying to be a bad kid. It's like, I feel awful. I'm just trying to not feel awful. So I'm going to explain this a little bit more through a story from my life. So I was a pretty rebellious teen. I got into a lot of chaos and a lot of intense situations that were very stressful for me and everyone around me. And I had a part, I called her Violet. And to clarify, this is not the same as like having multiple personalities. It can just help a lot to put a name to one of these parts, to be able to talk about it and acknowledge it and recognize it. It helps a lot for just recognizing by giving these parts a name. So Violet would come out when things were going haywire. And that was basically this, let's just burn this to the ground part. And Violet, this part of me, would develop an escape strategy. Like, I'm going to lie my way out of this. I'm going to try and run away. I'm going to create even more chaos so that this seems like less in comparison. So when I was in a huge amount of trouble with my parents, rather than being like, okay, I'll come clean about this. I'm going to be honest with you about what I've done, and I'm going to do what it takes to try and mend the situation and rebuild our trust. This part of me, Violet, would come in and try to escape the situation by being like, this is such an uncomfortable situation and experience that I'm having. I gotta get out of this. And what was really actually going on at the deepest level was that part of me, the self-destructive part, was actually trying to protect me from feeling shame, from taking accountability, from how it was trying to protect me from how painful it was to be in touch with reality. Because taking accountability and being honest with my parents would have meant being in the reality of how painful my life was at that moment. And so this part would come in and be like, nope, we're not going to be in touch with that. We're not going to acknowledge that. We're not going to feel that. We're going to keep running. We're going to keep creating more stress. We're going to keep creating more drama. We're just going to keep you away from how unbearable this pain feels. It was like, let me just numb, run, self-destruct, so I don't have to be with how painful my reality is. And the self-destruction, like the ways that I was coping, that was just a tool. Like, that was just a way to do that. It was just a way to avoid. It wasn't like I necessarily enjoyed doing those things or that those things were particularly appealing to me. It was just like, that was just a means to an end. It was just a way of achieving relief and protection from extreme pain and shame. So it wasn't enough for me to just have tools for communicating, because that part didn't care about the tools. Like, that part didn't want to use the tools to be able to cope with the situation or be communicative or come clean about it. Like, I could have had, and I did, years of education and therapy and interventions that gave me so many different skills and tools that I could have reached for in those moments. But that part of me didn't want to reach for the tools. It wasn't enough to just know more. I had to understand what that part of me, this part that I'm describing, Violet, was actually trying to do, trying to protect, and understand what her strategy was. Like, how does she usually do this? Okay, she creates more drama and chaos. Okay, I gotta become aware of that. And what is she afraid of? She is afraid of shame, and she is afraid of not being able to bear the emotional pain of being in touch with reality. So that was the really key piece that I did not learn from anyone when I was a teenager. I didn't learn this and realize this till I was an adult much later on. But that's why for so many teenagers, like, parents will kind of feel baffled because they're like, well, they know what to do. Like, they've been shown a different way to cope with their stress. They've been shown a different way to cope with their anxiety other than substance abuse or self-harm. Like, why do they keep doing that? And it's not that they don't, it's not their lack of knowledge. It's not a lack of practical knowledge. It's a lack of understanding of the deepest inner workings of their own parts and their psyche. Because all these parts are ultimately trying to protect your child, and for you as well, because we all have this. Like, it's a matter of listening and understanding what these parts want so that you can actually get to the deepest layer of understanding. Like, in those moments where I was doing something incredibly destructive, I had to ask myself, what am I actually needing? What am I afraid of? How can I navigate this situation, not just from the urgency and the reactivity of this part, but from, like, me, Kira, who can see what's going on and make a choice that's actually in alignment and support with the life that I want to create. So again, like, just focusing on learning more tools is missing getting to the deepest layer of what's actually going on. And that is the piece of awareness that completely shifted how I was able to respond to challenges that I had as a teenager. Oh, thank you, Denise. I appreciate you saying that. The other part to this is I didn't really have faith that things could be different for me. Like, I struggled with all of those feelings I named, like feeling insecure and feeling suicidal from a very, very young age. So I didn't have a lot of other evidence or belief or proof that I could even feel differently. And I didn't have people around me. The only people around me who dealt with what I was dealing with were teenagers in programs. And sometimes that was really helpful because it made me feel not so alone, but it also sometimes brought me even more into my own dysfunction, because that was how I was connecting with them, was through dysfunction. Or they were teaching me, you know, like, I learned more about, like, how to get high or how to hurt myself in programs than I ever would have learned outside of them, because I was there with kids who also really struggled with that stuff. So things really changed for me when I was a young adult and I left treatment, and I actually met other adults and other people who were relatable and wise and inspirational to me, who had been through what I'd been through and got what I was going through, but they dealt with it in a different way. Like, that was so life-changing for me, because I think we as adults take for granted, like, the perspective that we have. And this is, like, I am the biggest, like, champion for the insight of teenagers. I have the utmost admiration and respect for them. So this is not me dissing them in any way. But when I remember my concept of life and the world as a teenager, like, I really didn't know what I didn't know. And I didn't know how many more paths and lifestyles and ways of just living and being were available to me. So I was just like, I'm dysfunctional, so this is what my life will be. Because it was either like people were also dysfunctional like me and then also having tough times, or they were like normal and healthy and had no idea what I was going through. And I was like, well, I'm not like you, so my life's not going to be stable and healthy like yours. So when I was able to meet people who got my pain and spoke my language, but they were walking with it in a different way, that showed me, oh, I can do that too. Like, there's actually a different way that I can be with this and experience this and choose to live my life from this in a much more healthy and self-honoring way. And the final thing I want to say about this, and this is usually what I share with the teenagers I work with when we talk about this, is how can you see that the gifts of what these parts are doing? Like, there's actually a brilliance that's happening. You're trying to keep yourself safe, and you have a lot of power, and you have resourcefulness. Like these parts can be incredibly creative in the ways that they numb and distract and avoid. Like there's a creativity and a resourcefulness and intelligence to how they operate. But how can you redirect all of those gifts and all of those talents towards something that's actually serving you and supporting you? Because it never to just numb something or to try and force yourself to change. It doesn't work to try and bulldoze over these parts. Believe me, I tried for so many years. I just tried to numb how I felt. I tried to just ignore the parts of me that were like I thought were too needy or unacceptable or too sad or too anxious or unlovable. Like, let me just shove these away. And I had to realize, like, they deserve a seat at the table. They have something to say. And I will never make any movement if I just keep trying to deny them and ignore them. I promise you that doesn't work. So what really needs to happen is your teenager has to come into contact with these parts, has to recognize what is going on at the deepest level when they are making self-destructive choices, so that they can be in the driver's seat and they can be the one who is creating their life from a place of consciousness and wisdom, and not just reacting in the moments with how they feel. So that's why just learning more tools doesn't always work, because there's a much, much deeper thing going on. And then once they have that awareness, then the tools can be helpful. Then when their part is in one of these moments, like with me, I'm like, okay, instead of coping with self-harm, I'm going to cope by doing breathing exercises and calling a friend. So those tools come in later once you have this foundational awareness. Okay. I appreciate all of you being here so much. I see Shauna, I see Denise, I see Emily, Karen, Abby, Lauren. Thank you so much for spending the time here with me today. If you watch this video, I would love to hear your thoughts and if there are any questions you have. And Shauna, yeah, you can absolutely let your teenager watch my video. And if you have any more questions or comments, please leave them for me. I would absolutely love to hear what your thoughts are. Okay, bye everyone.